Welcome in, everybody, to a deep dive that takes us right smack into the middle of a family drama with some seriously unexpected twists. We're going to be looking at excerpts from a novel. And let me tell you, it gets intense. So imagine this. Okay. A family I am in India. They're trying to pick up the pieces after a tragic drowning. Except what seems like a pretty straightforward accident. Well, it's anything but.
It's fascinating how the author actually chooses to tell this story. Through the eyes of the children. Twins, named Esta and Rahel.
Oh, wow.
They're right at the center of this whole mess, trying to make sense of adult emotions and manipulations that are way over their heads.
Yeah. You're dropped right into the interrogation room, basically, from the very beginning. Inspector Thomas Mathew, he's questioning Esta and Rahel about the death of their English cousin. Her name's Sophie Moll. And they tell him about, well, they were on a boat ride. The boat capsizes, and how Sophie Moll couldn't swim. On the surface, it sounds like a terrible accident, but you can tell that the inspector isn't buying it. What do you make of that?
Well, the inspector has a history with this family.
Uh-huh.
He's dealt with them before. Specifically, with a situation involving a man named Velutha. There's a sense that he's kind of seen through their facade before, that he knows there's more to the story than they're letting on.
Okay, so the tension's already thick, and then in walks baby Kachama,
Yeah.
a really powerful figure in the family. She basically takes over the whole situation,
Oh, yeah.
pulls the children aside, and starts spinning this completely different story. What's happening here?
Oh, it's a classic power play, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
She preys on the children's fear and love for their mother, Ammu. She tells them that the police think Velutha killed Sophie Moll and convinces them that they'll all go to jail unless they just play along.
Yeah, and I was struck by this one detail. Okay, baby Kachama is so stressed out, right, that she's worried that the inspector's going to see the color of her stool in the bathroom.
Oh, wow.
It's dark humor, but it really shows how desperate she is to control the narrative, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This tiny, seemingly irrelevant detail speaks volumes about her state of mind. It underscores the author's brilliant use of dark humor to highlight the gravity of the situation. It's like a punch to the gut, reminding us that even in the midst of tragedy, life's absurdities still exist.
Yeah, they really do. So faced with jail time and losing their mother, the twins, they agree to go along with baby Koshama's plan. But the author doesn't just tell us they agreed, okay? She paints this really vivid picture of Esta's inner turmoil.
Yeah.
He sees people trapped in a paperweight, frozen in time with waltz music playing in his head. What do you think she's trying to convey with this imagery?
That's where the story transcends a simple whodunit and delves into the psychological impact of trauma on a child. It's not just about what happened to Sophie Moll's, but how these events shatter Esta's innocence. The paperweight symbolizes his world, his childhood, suddenly becoming constricted, unchangeable.
Right. And it's Esta who gets chosen by baby Kochama to identify Velutha. She considers him, quote, more tractable and responsible, end quote. What does that tell us about the family dynamic?
It's chilling, isn't it?
It is.
It reveals a warped sense of responsibility where children are seen as tools to protect the family's reputation, regardless of the truth.
So little S is taken to this dark, grim lockup, and there he sees Velutha, beaten and barely clinging to life. The inspector asks Essa if this is the man, and Essa whispers, yes. It's just one word, but...
That single yes is devastating. It's the moment Esta loses his innocence, the moment he becomes complicit in a lie with potentially fatal consequences. Think about that weight on a child's shoulders, carrying the burden of a choice they never should have had to make.
And that night, Velutha dies from his injuries. It feels like the end, but...
But it's actually just the beginning of a new kind of suffering for Esta, Rahel, and their mother. The story doesn't end with Velutha's death. It's the catalyst for a whole new wave of pain and secrets. It's important to remember we're only seeing fragments of this story here, like snapshots of a very specific moment in time. These excerpts don't give us all the answers. We're left to kind of piece together the events and motivations, much like an archaeologist digging for clues.
We are like detectives trying to figure out what really happened.
Right.
And just when you think you have a grip on the situation, another layer of complexity peels back. So take the aftermath of Sophie Moll's funeral.
Yeah.
Ammu, completely heartbroken and fueled by anger at this point, takes the twins back to the police station. What's going on there?
Ammu is wrestling with her conscience.
Uh-huh.
It seems like she wants to retract the children's forced confession, to finally set the record straight. But by this point, the system has moved on.
Right.
Velutha's body is gone, disposed of in the pauper's pit.
Hmm.
Ammu's left facing this crushing reality that some actions can't be undone.
Oh, the weight of that. Knowing you can't go back and fix things, it's almost unbearable. And baby Kachama is watching this whole thing unfold, completely terrified that Ammu's going to blow her carefully constructed narrative sky high.
Exactly. Remember, Baby Kachama built her whole scheme on the assumption that Ammu would never publicly admit to her relationship with Velutha.
Yeah.
Social stigma was just too great. But Ammu going back to the police station, that throws everything into question. It's a direct challenge to Baby Kachana's authority, her control.
So what does she do? She's not one to go down without a fight?
She pulls out her most powerful weapon, manipulation.
Uh-huh.
She turns Chaco, Ammu's own brother, against her.
Wow.
Exploiting his grief and rage over Sophie Mole's death. That's a classic divide and conquer strategy.
So instead of the family uniting in their grief, they're torn apart, pitted against each other.
Yeah.
And Ammu becomes the scapegoat, bearing the brunt of everyone's pain and accusations.
Precisely. Baby Kachama understands the family dynamics. She knows how to manipulate those vulnerabilities to get what she wants. And what she wants is Ammu, out of IMM, silenced and unable to disrupt the family's carefully crafted image.
And tragically, it works. Ammu is forced to leave, and Esta, one of the twins, is sent away. It's a complete dismantling of their family unit. This is where the excerpts end. But the questions linger. Did Sophie Mole's death actually happen the way the children initially described? Or was there more to the story?
That ambiguity is one of the most powerful aspects of this deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Hmm.
We're left with those fragments, the boat capsizing, Baby Kachama's fabricated narrative, and the lingering suspicion that we may never know the full truth.
Yeah. It's like we're looking at a puzzle with missing pieces, trying to make sense of a story that refuses to be fully told. And that lack of closure just amplifies the sense of unease and injustice that hangs over the entire narrative. It makes you wonder, how often do things like this happen in real life? Families torn apart by secrets and lies, with the truth buried under layers of manipulation and self-preservation.
Yeah, it's like we're left with this haunting feeling that something terrible has happened, but we can't quite grasp the full extent of it.
It makes me think about the author's use of symbolism. Like, there's that image of the paperweight with the waltzing couple that Essa keeps fixating on, and the moth that settles on the children's hearts when Baby Kachama arrives. What do you make of those symbols?
Well, the author uses these symbols to create a sense of foreboding, of innocence being stifled and ultimately destroyed. So the paperweight, with its trapped figures eternally waltzing, represents Esta's world, his childhood, suddenly frozen and unchangeable. And then the moth, often associated with fragility and darkness. It symbolizes the impending doom that Baby Kachama brings with her.
Right, yeah. It's as if those symbols represent the vulnerability of childhood, how easily it can be shattered by the weight of adult secrets and manipulations. And it's interesting how Esta sees the couple in the paperweight as happy, even though they're trapped.
That detail is crucial. It speaks to the complexity of Esta's emotional state. He's desperately clinging to an idealized vision of happiness, even as his world is crumbling around him,
Yeah, and that feeling of escaping into a fantasy world is amplified by the paperweight waltz music that's constantly playing in his head. It's like he's creating his own soundtrack to this traumatic experience, trying to distance himself from the pain and confusion.
Yeah, exactly. The music becomes a metaphor for his internal world, a world that's becoming increasingly detached from the reality of his situation. And that detachment, that inability to fully process the trauma, it has long-lasting consequences.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's made me realize how devastating secrets and lies can be, especially within a family. You start to wonder, at what cost do we protect our own interests? And what happens when the most vulnerable among us are forced to bear the burden of those choices?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah.
This story forces us to confront the ripple effects of trauma, how one event can reverberate through generations, shaping the lives and relationships of everyone involved.
It really makes you think about the choices we make, the stories we tell ourselves, and the impact those stories have on others. And sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that remain untold. The silences that speak volumes about the truths we're afraid to face.
The excerpts we've explored today may not give us all the answers, but they offer a powerful glimpse into the dark undercurrents of family life, the ways in which love and loyalty can be twisted into something destructive.
So as you move forward, think about those lingering questions. What happens to Esta and Rachel? Do they ever find a way to heal from this experience? Then what about Ammu? How does she cope with the loss of her children and the injustice she's faced? Perhaps in those unanswered questions, we find the most profound insights of all. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.